Shalom Aleichem, Mishpochim. Chag Chanukah Sameach. May this Chanukah be the brightest Chanukah yet, filled with the light of Mashiach, with his arrival, now, soon, and speedily. Amen. I am beginning another reading, a new Torah portion in the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. The Torah portion is Tzav, the second Parsha of Leviticus. It is chapter 6, 1 through 11, verses 1 through 11. And this is with Onkelos on the Torah. So without any further ado, let us begin. Torah on top and Onkelos on the bottom. Chapter 6, starting verse 1. Torah. The Lord spoke with Moses, saying, Command Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the burnt offering itself that is burned on the altar all night until morning, so that the fire of the altar can be ignited with it. Verse 1. Onkelos, with. The Aramaic has God politely speak with Moses, rather than the Hebrew's more dictatorial to. Verse 2, Onkelos, command. Chapter 6 and 7 focus on how the priests function in the sanctuary when the sacrifices mentioned in chapters 1 through 5 are offered. Among other things, the system allows the priests to receive a share of all the sacrifices except for the burnt offerings, which were totally consumed on the altar. Why does the Torah use the word command rather than its usual say or speak? Sifra explains that command implies a sense of urgency. Interestingly, Rashi, Chazkuni, Nachmanides, and others suggest that the burnt offering is one example where the priests had to be urged to act through a command, since this offering was totally consumed on the altar, and the priests received no compensation for their labors. The law of both the Hebrew Torah and its Aramaic translation, Oraita, both containing the same root, are customarily translated to law, as law, but their precise meaning is instruction, or teaching, or guidance. The Bible has other terms that are frequently understood as law, but which also have more specific technical meanings. Chak is a higher level ordinance, that is, inscribed. Mishpat and din refer to court decisions, and mitzvah, found in this chapter as tzav, is a command. Burnt offering. Verses 1 through 6 concern the two daily community burnt offerings, consisting of 2 yearling lambs. One was offered in the morning and the other in the late afternoon. The sacrifices were accompanied by a grain offering and a libation of wine. As with the other sacrifices mentioned in Leviticus, our Targumist does not add any explanatory information about the offering. See comment. In contrast, the Midrashic Targum Pseudo-Jonathan states that the burnt offerings were brought to atone for thoughts of the heart. This reflects the view in Job, chapter 1, verse 5, and Leviticus Rabbah, chapter 7, verse 3, and that they recalled the sacrifice that was originally brought as a burnt offering on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. See Numbers, chapter 28, verse 6. Even Ezra here, in chapter 1, verse 3, defines Olah as going up, and states that it is called Olah because the entire offering goes up. That is, it is burned on the altar. That is burned. Scripture's Mokta is spelled with a reduced-sized mem. All of the Targums, as well as the Septuagint, the Samaritan Bible, Sifra, and other commentaries handle the word as if the mem were normal-sized, as they do the aleph in Vayikra, in chapter 1, verse 1. We noted in our introduction that Onkelos attaches the letter Dalid, usually meaning of, or that, to 465 words in Leviticus. We also mentioned that we will usually not point out all of these additions. However, it is worth noting here that our Targumist attaches a Dalid to the Aramaic version of Mokdah, and thereby converts it from the noun firewood, as it is understood by the Saadia Gaon and the Ibn Ezra, to a verb that is burned all night No sacrifice was brought at night, but the daily evening burnt offering was burned before sunset and kept on the altar through the night. The Mishnah, Megillah, chapter 2, Mishnah 6, and Sifra state that this verse allows any offering not fully consumed by the altar fire to remain on the altar even at night until it is fully burned. However, Bechor Schor felt that the plain meaning of the text is totally different. The verse is commanding that the priests must leave limbs and fat on the altar to burn during the entire night, for it is disrespectful to leave the altar unused. He also saw this command in verse 5. The altar fire should be ignited with it. It may not go out. B. The Targums insert Teheh, which is B, in this chapter, in this passage, as well as in 5 and 6, for the sake of clarity. Verse 3, Torah. The priest should dress in garments of linen with pants of linen next to his body. He separates the ashes of the burnt offering that the fire ate on the altar and places them on the side of the altar. Then he removes his garments, dresses in other garments, and carries the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. Verse 3, Onkelos, the priest should dress. The Babylonian Talmud in Zevachim 23b and Sifra notes that although only the tunic and breeches are mentioned in this verse, the priests were required to wear 2 additional garments, a mitre and a sash. Bechor Schor states that the priest was required to wear the priestly garments when he ascended the altar out of respect for the sanctity of the altar. However, before he leaves the sanctuary, he removes these garments because it is disrespectful to the priestly garments to wear them outside of the sanctuary. Garments, scriptures, mido, means his measurement, which is a figure of speech. Our Targumist captures its intent by pluralizing it to garments, since the priest wore more than one garment. He also drops the pronoun his and uses the terminology in the next passage and in Exodus chapter 28, verse 42. The singular form mido appears only once more in Hebrew scripture in 2 Samuel chapter 20, verse 8, where it is also a collective term implying the plural garments. And it is interpreted in this way by Targum Jonathan to the prophets. It occurs a third time as kemido in Psalms 109, in a context that requires a singular, and it is therefore left in the singular by the Psalms Targumist. In contrast, Sifra, the Babylonian Talmud, Yoma 23b, and the Saadia Gaon, Rashi, and even Ezra state that Scripture's literal singular, his measurement, signifies the priest's shirt, mentioned in Exodus chapter 28, verse 40, which must be fitted to his measurement. Next to his body, Ibn Ezra notes that the Bible used delicate language instead of saying next to his sexual organ. Separates. It has here termed vehirim as separates, vehirim. Literally, he lifts. The Aramaic explains the biblical figurative language, as in chapter 2, verse 9. This separation of the ashes was done in a respectful, ceremonious manner daily and was called Terumat HaDeshen. Verse 4 discusses another type of ash removal, which was performed as needed when the ashes accumulated. 8. The Targum fails to explain Scripture's metaphor 8 as consumed. Side. Scripture has this as etzel. See commentary. If the priest found any part of the sacrifice that was not consumed, he must replace it upon the altar, based on the Babylonian Talmud, Yoma 45b. Verse 4. Onkelos removes his garments. Must the priest change his clothes before removing the ashes? Rashi maintained that although he should, it was not mandatory. It was a precaution so that he would not soil the clothes he used during the sacrifice with the dirty ashes. However, Nachmanides insisted that he must remove the special priestly garments, since it was likely that they would get soiled and only clean garments could be used when the priest officiated at the altar. Carries. Sifra explains that although generally only priests without physical defects could act at the altar, the task of removing the ashes could be performed by priests who had bodily defects. clean place. Although they were ashes, they were given special respect both in how they were removed and where they would be placed, since they came from the holy altar. Verse 5, Torah, the altar, fire should be ignited on it, the altar. It may not go out. The priest burns wood on it, the altar, every morning. He arranges the burnt offering on it and burns the fat parts of the holy sacrifice. Verse 5, Onkelos, B. See commentary, verse 2. Every morning. The Bible's ba boker, in the morning, is also found in Exodus chapter 30, verse 7. The repetition indicates continuity, hence every morning. A similar repetition is in Psalm 68. Yom yom, day, day, signifies every day. Burnt offering. The morning and evening daily burnt offerings were the first and last sacrifices offered each day upon the altar. No sacrifice could be brought before the morning burnt offering or after the one offered in the evening. Holy sacrifice. The Bible, this commentary has it as shelamim. Verse 6, Torah, a perpetual fire should be burning on the altar. It may not go out. Verse 7, this is the law of the meal offering that Aaron's sons will offer before the Lord before the altar. Verse 6, Onkelos, perpetual fire. The altar's perpetual fire signified the perpetual devotion of the Israelites to God. It burned even on the Sabbath, when the priests were in a state of ritual impurity, and during the tumult of the Israelite journeys in the wilderness. It was used to ignite the candelabrum in the tabernacle and, later, in the temple. When the temple was destroyed in 70 CE, the candelabrum and the Ner Tamid, the perpetual light, still kept to this day over the Torah ark in synagogues, became the symbol of the perpetual devotion between Jews and God. Verse 7, Onkelos, the law of. Verses 7 through 11 discuss the priestly role in the grain sacrifice, the mincha, which is found in chapter 2. The mincha must be prepared without leavening. Male priests ate the mincha in the sanctuary. In contrast, both males and females, priests and non-priests, ate the shelamim sacrifice anywhere within the Israelite desert camp. Will offer. The Aramaic pluralizes the Hebrew ha-krev, since it concerns Aaron's sons, and converts it from the present to the future tense, since they will offer the sacrifice after the consecration period. The Targum generally uses the future will offer in Leviticus because the offerings that are discussed will occur in the future, and the past tense in Numbers, where the Torah describes offerings that had already been made. Before the altar, the Hebrew el paneh is rendered le kadam in the Aramaic translation. Verse 8, Torah, separate from it a handful of fine wheat flour of the meal offering, oil, and all the frankincense that is on the meal offering. Put it on the altar so that it may be accepted with pleasure as a memorial before the Lord. Verse 9, Torah, what remains from it is eaten by Aaron and his sons. It must be eaten as an unleavened cake in a holy place. They must eat it in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. Verse 8, Onkelos, separate. The Bible has the metaphor lift. From it, biblical Hebrew frequently mixes gender in a single section and does so here. It uses the masculine form of from it, mimenu, in verse 8, and the feminine mimena in verse 9. The Targum frequently changes the tenses and conjugations to create the conformity preferred in modern Hebrew and Aramaic, and renders both here as mineh, from it. Sifra, from the school of Rabbi Akiva, felt that each word was purposely placed in the Torah to teach a lesson, and therefore the different genders must refer to different situations. See our introduction to Genesis, where we point out that Onkelos rejects this approach and accepts that of Rabbi Ishmael, that the Torah is written in human language. Therefore, Sifra states that since the masculine form can neither refer to the mincha, the meal offering, nor to the solet, the fine wheat flour, both of which are written in the feminine form. It must refer to the masculine word keli, the vessel or pan, that is holding the flour, and therefore to the law requiring that at least a full tenth of an ephah must be in the pan when the priest separates the wheat flour. Handful, see commentary. Fine wheat flour, accepted with pleasure. Before, the Bible has this sweet savor. This commentary has this as sweet savor. Before the sweet savor. Memorial, see commentary. All right, verse 9. Unleavened cake. The Aramaic translation reduces the Hebrew plural matzot to the singular here in chapter 10, verse 12, since, as noted by Sifra, the passages do not require the eating of more than one matzah with the meal offering. Verse 10, Torah. It may not be baked as unleavened bread. I have given it as their portion for my sacrifices. It is very holy, like the guilt offering and a sham offering. Every male among Aaron's sons may eat it. It is a perpetual rule for all generations concerning the sacrifice of the Lord. Anything that touches them shall be holy. Verse 10. Unkelos, not to be baked. The part of the meal offering that was apportioned to the priest could not be leavened. Sacrifices. Fire. Bible has it here, fire. And in verse 11. Guilt offering, asham. The Targum retains the Hebrew nouns indicating that they refer to the offerings and do not signify transgression. Verse 11. Every male, even priests with bodily defects that rendered them unqualified to perform the sacrificial service, were allowed to participate in the priestly distribution of the meal offering and in its consumption. Sacrifice, see commentary. Touches. The Targums generally rendered scriptures touch as karav, which means both touch and approach. And that is the first Aliyah, chapter 6, verse 1 through 11 of the Parsha Tzav. And I will read from the Daily Wisdom on the Parshiot of Tzav. First, let me do the introduction. Details of the sacrifices. The Israelite installation rites. The second section of the book of Leviticus is the continuation and completion of the preceding section, opening as God tells Moses to command, Tzav in Hebrew, Aaron and his sons to follow the procedures for offering up sacrifices. The second half of the section describes the week-long installation rites by which the priests and the tabernacle were inaugurated. All right. This is the Daily Wisdom on the Parshiot of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Chabad Lubavitcher Rebbe. What I just read was the first reading, Leviticus chapter 6, verses 1 through 11. The sacrifice offered up during the day burned on the altar throughout the night. Every morning, one of the priests would be appointed to remove the innermost ashes left from the previous day's sacrifices, depositing them at the foot of the altar. In addition, whenever the remaining ashes accumulated to the point that they prevented the fire from consuming the sacrifices, the priest appointed that day to remove the innermost ashes removed these accumulated ashes as well, depositing them outside the camp. The title on this Daily Wisdom on the Parshiot is called The Eternal Flame. The fire that will burn upon the altar regularly must not go out. We may sometimes feel so distant from the Torah's expectations of us or encumbered by negative spiritual baggage that it is hard for us to imagine how we could even begin to live in accordance with our ideals. In times of such pessimism, this verse empowers us to keep our divine fire burning even when we feel unqualified or otherwise unable to enter realms of holiness. By keeping our enthusiasm fired, even in such times, the divine flame within us will eventually burn away all impediments to joyful, holy living. As the Maggid of Mezrich interpreted this verse, if the inner fire of the heart is kept burning continuously, it will extinguish all negativity. But the fire can only be effective if it is kept burning continuously. Any lapse in enthusiasm is an opportunity for pessimism to creep in. An intermittent fire or the memory of recent flames is therefore not enough. We must become adept at keeping our inner fires burning no matter how our moods may vary. All right, I'm going to leave with that. And that is the Torah reading, the first Aliyah on the Parsha Tzav in the book of Vayikra, and the daily wisdom on the Parshiot of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Have a wonderful morning. Boker Tov and Chag Chanukah Sameach.